is 6:01 on Tuesday, February 22nd. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order the Liquor Control Board meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so this is our typical this time of year slate of renewals for restaurant and liquor licenses. So on our regular items, first up are the restaurant-only 2022 renewals, including Subway and Tiny Thai restaurants. Are there any comments from staff on these renewals?
No, Mayor, there are not.
Any questions or concerns from council? All right. Would someone like to approve the restaurant-only renewals?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up, we have item B. These are our second-class liquor license 2022 renewals. There's a number of them in here, so I won't name them all, but any comments from staff or council? All right. Would anyone like to make a move to approve the second-class liquor licenses?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item C, our first and third class liquor license renewals. Any questions or comments here? And I should say, if you are a member of the public on Zoom, feel free to raise hand if you did have a question or comment. And in City Hall, if you just want to wave to Hal and Mike there, they'll let me know. All right, hearing no concerns, would someone like to make a motion to approve the first and third class liquor license renewals?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item D, our sidewalk permit renewals. Any questions or concerns here? All right, do I have a motion to approve the sidewalk permit renewals?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item E, our entertainment permit renewals. Any questions or concerns here? All right, would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by, motion to approve. Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item F, outside consumption permit renewals. Any questions or concerns there?
No.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve the outside consumption permit renewals?
So moved. Second.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. That brings us to the end of our Liquor Control Board agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn the Liquor Control Board?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so it is 6:05 p.m. on Tuesday, February 22nd. I'm now going to call us to order as the Winooski City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, agenda review. Are there any questions or concerns about the order of the agenda this evening? Hearing no concerns, I'll move to public comment. So public comment is meant as space for attendees to speak to anything not included on tonight's agenda. There's something on the agenda that you want to address. We ask that you please wait until we get to that part of the meeting. So I'll open it now for public comment. If you are on the Zoom meeting, please use the raise hand feature. And if you are in council chambers, you can raise your actual hand.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, welcome, Grace. Oh, if you could please
Hi.
introduce yourself so we have your name.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Grace. I live over on North Street here in Winooski, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm not sure if this is a time, I haven't been to very many of these meetings, so I'm not sure if this is a time where you all could answer some questions for me. But I am just wondering what the city is doing about the evictions that are happening at 300 Main Street. I know Mayor Lott, you commented last week that the city was actively working on this. And I just wanted to see if there was any information about what's happening with this situation. I know there's not a lot the city can do because it is, private property. But these types of evictions are a system-wide issue, right? These types of evictions are affecting more folks than just the families at 300 Main Street. So I was wondering if there was anyone from the city who would be able to speak to that.
Sure, I can make a statement. So for those who aren't aware, there's a property on Main Street where about 24 families have been given a 6-month notice for eviction as the landlord intends to renovate the property. We are very concerned about this displacement of so many families. Many of the folks who live there are, lower income, new Americans, members of the BIPOC community. Many have children in our school district. And given the incredibly tight housing market in Winooski and Chittenden County, it's going to be a real challenge for families to relocate, let alone find affordable rent. So there's 2 things happening. One, the city is actually coordinating a weekly meeting with housing agencies, some refugee support organizations, the school district, and other partners to work together to try to figure out what we can do to support and mitigate the impact of this upcoming potential eviction. So there are a number of organizations and agencies involved. The state refugee office is aware, the governor's office is actually aware. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff happening. But something I want to make clear to Winooski as a community is that this kind of displacement, as you lifted up, Grace, is going to continue to happen if we don't address the incredibly low vacancy rate across our region. Our housing and planning commissions have been actively looking at potential changes to local regulation that can help increase the supply and diversity of housing available in Winooski. That's only one piece of the puzzle. We've been doing some advocacy to the state on how they are using their federal ARPA dollars. It's something that we need to consider when we discuss how we want to use our funds. And there's just the housing problem is significant, and there's a lot of different things at play here. But I do want to get that message out there that all of us that are a part of this community, that we can be a part of the solution. And there's a reason that so many apartments are being built, because the demand is there, because there are people in need of housing. I hope that's helpful, a helpful update.
Thanks. Could I ask a quick follow-up question if possible?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think something that the city is aware of, right, is that there are just massive amounts of code violations, and there are folks who are paying full rent every month, particularly low-income folks, particularly folks on Section 8, particularly folks who do not speak English and are refugees, who are paying full rent every month to live in an apartment that is not safe or habitable. And I'm wondering what, if anything, the city is doing to specifically address that issue.
That is something that our housing commission has been tackling. Our code enforcement and Chief Audi here, I don't know if there's anything you want to specifically add, but has been working with that property owner and others. We do coordinate with refugee support agencies, try to get interpreters available. I also am aware that the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigration, which supports a lot of these residents, had a housing renter support program that was defunded under the Trump administration. And so they haven't had the capacity to provide supports that they would like to. They have been able to refund that and are starting to redo that work. And I think that has been part of the gap that we've seen in our community, that folks have been, unfortunately, without the resources that they needed. I will, Wendy or John, if there's anything you want to add. Heather, I see your hand.
I just wanted to add one thing. We do currently have an equity audit going on in the city, and one of the specific areas that's being addressed, Grace, is inequities in housing. So I think some of the things that you're mentioning will come to the surface with that and will be elevated. And then after we have completed that equity audit, which is due in the next couple of months, we've also acquired a municipal planning grant to come up with an equitable housing plan, use a consultant to help us come up with an equitable housing plan for the city of Winooski. And as part of that, that will look at inequities in ordinances, in our local land use regulations, in practices that the city can change to make it more equitable so that everyone has access to safe, healthy, quality, durable housing. So my hope is that those two pieces will also contribute to this conversation and help us to make the positive change that we can make at a local level.
Thank you for that detail.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Wendy?
Mayor, I just would like Chief Audi to comment on the code violations, because I don't want to leave the misconception that the city has not addressed the code violations, because we've been working on that since October and November. And I think it's important for the record that Grace know what we've done.
Yeah, so short kind of update there. Again, late October, November, we did inspect the entire property, all 24 units, and there was, I don't have the paperwork right in front of me, but 80 to 90 plus violations cited across the the 4 buildings. Most of those violations have been corrected. There are 3 units where the property owner is waiting for cabinetry and countertops. That's a supply chain issue. We know those are on order, and we expect those to be in the next couple weeks. If everything goes well. Again, it was impacted by COVID supply chain. Same with a couple egress windows, and then ongoing mitigation of an infestation. In mitigating an infestation, getting a lot of questions about that. That is a process in which that happens. Units are treated, and then there's follow-ups that happen on a weekly basis. Again, staff is seeing that information weekly. We know it's happening. And then currently there are no units that are uninhabitable. I believe there's upwards of 7 units that are going to be vacant soon. I can confirm that there's 2, and told that there will be some more that will be vacated shortly, but again, not due to code violations.
Thank you, Chief. All right, were there any other public comments this evening? Okay, Grace, I saw your chat question. Chief was speaking to 300 Main, not a full data set. Any public comment in chambers? Okay. So we will move on to our consent agenda. We have our city council minutes from 2/7, and then the payroll warrants. And Hal, you missed the 2/7 meeting, right?
I did.
Okay. So are there any questions about the consent agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the council minutes of February 7th?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those abstaining?
Abstain.
All right, motion carries. I have a motion to approve the payroll warrants.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Council reports. Can I start with Bryn?
Sure. I don't have much to report. Attended the airport commission meeting last week. They had some good news that they had approval for the pilot phase for 70 decibels. So initially there was some expectation that they would have to go in and provide audits for each of the homes to justify sound insulation. But during the pilot, they were able to get approval for the 70 plus decibels for any homes that were within that boundary. So that will allow them to move forward faster. And I believe some next steps that they have planned is to stand up what basically is what they called a field house, or a center where they can receive additional questions about eligibility for sound insulation and phasing. There was some consideration about having a home that has had sound insulation complete so that folks can visit and walk through to see and experience the difference between when sound insulation is complete or not. But that is just in the discussion phase right now. There were some data, as there is every meeting, about the status of complaints received. That's moved from, I believe, a hotline to purely email-based system. And that I believe there is over 200 complaints total received in the last couple years. And now they're able to start breaking the data out by individuals. So unique versus compiled complaints. So they're doing some additional further categorization based off of that. But it was a good meeting. There's no discussion of the charter change, allowing Winooski a seat on the commission just yet. So I anticipate that coming at future meetings. And I guess the last element for that, the chair and vice chair were reappointed during this last meeting as well. So that's the airport commission, and our next municipal infrastructure commission will be this Thursday. We'll be welcoming 2 new commissioners and doing some onboarding with them, as well as appointing a new chair and potentially vice chair for that committee. So we're looking forward to having our first meeting of the year this week. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Bryn. Jim, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'll only share one piece of news, which is the tree committee was able to meet last week and spent the bulk of the time discussing the centennial tree planting that'll be taking place at Richards Park in June 4th. And the committee is very excited to be involved in that process and in the planting. And we also discussed some plans for doing a tree walk related to emerald ash borer tree removals in the downtown core. They'll be happening hopefully in the neighboring park, and some other outreach ideas. And it's good to have the group get back together because the next thing that they're going to look at is updating the tree ordinance, which is one of our policy priorities. One of our priorities and strategies items for municipal infrastructure this year. So it's good to have that group together. And other than that, I have no updates. I just want to say that it's kind of crazy to see Hal and Mike in council chambers again. for the last time, I wanted to just take a moment to say I appreciate the time that I've gotten to spend with both of you over the last 3 years, and thank you for the service, and hope that we'll get to see you more in the future without masks, not through a tiny little box on the screen. And just really want to appreciate both of you for what you've done for the city, what you'll do for the city, and being a part of this council with me. So thank you so much.
With that, Mike, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for the kind words. It's true, this is mine and Hal's last council meeting, and I figured I'd finish where I started. It's a lot different from going in-person meetings to Zoom. I miss the person-to-person, face-to-face conversations. Even through COVID, I'm a people person, so interacting or going to someone's door was, not easy for me to do because I'd rather talk to people than email. I find it more personable. I just want to thank the city staffers who helped me navigate my tenure here on council, for the education, from Jesse Baker, our former manager, to the intern manager, Lindy, and every single city staffer here that I've always called and asked for advice, or, when residents called me to find out why the sidewalks weren't plowed, I'd call John Rouse and he'd give me an answer, so I'd call him back. It's been a great privilege to serve the city of Winooski. As you know, I'm a lifelong resident here, and it's been quite the honor. It's been quite the education, and I'm glad I did it. And I want the person who fills my chair, I hope you do right by the city and by the voters. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And Hal, your concern.
Thank you, Mayor. So I attended the Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission meeting for my last time. And it was a very special meeting because we really focused on our own personal experiences around the pandemic, and how did it impact us, what's needed going forward. And I think the common thread was the whole notion of how do we make sure we are experiencing positive mental health. So I think the purpose of that kind of conversation was to get a better sense of how we might really consider these ARPA funds that are before us. And I really applaud the commission for wanting to reach out to the greater community with those same kinds of questions and just get a real pulse of where we are and where we need to go. So that was a great meeting to end on. I was asked to attend the downtown Winooski meeting, which I thought was a really exciting and engaging group. I recommend any of the councilors, if you have an opportunity to wear that hat, to please do so. Heather Carrington gave us an update on the $100,000 that the council approved on January 24th to begin spending that down with a focus on supporting businesses that are really hurting. She talked about the guidelines that they pulled together for that, which is a requirement that we asked of them, so moving going forward. So we also talked about the farmers market and how that planning is underway. There's 8 vendors who've signed up so far. We're expecting probably 15 to 20 vendors to sign up. And that begins on May 29th. There was also conversation about the centennial birthday party, which will kick off on June 4th as an opening event, and many other events to follow for our celebration of our city's heritage. There's talk about the Juneteenth event, which will be for the first time, which will be held on June 18th. Juneteenth was the official emancipation of slaves in our country, and has become a growing holiday. and also talked about making plans for celebrating French Heritage Day, which is scheduled for June 26th. The downtown Winooski group has been involved in a statewide coalition of other downtown organizations, and there was conversation about potential funds that might be coming our way for that kind of participation. And let's see, what else? There's, along with that, there's potential funding that we can certainly be seriously considered. Could be up to $20,000 that would be allotted to us. This is all connected through the Vermont Tourism Department and helping cities like ours to strengthen our outreach to tourists. And one of the major concerns was upgrading our website, and so these funds will go a long way to make that happen. I think that's about it for that meeting. But once again, I would recommend, it's a great group of people and very excited about our community, and I think it's a worthy group to connect with if you have the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Hal.
Sure.
So I too, to Deputy Mayor Colston and Councilor Myers, want to express my gratitude for your service in this role. You know, you've both been involved in city council, commissions, and committees for a number of years, and I really appreciate the commitment to Winooski that you've shown. The amount of like community service and engagement I know you both are involved in, I just really appreciate it, and the focus that you have put on getting stuff done for Winooski. With your help during your time here, we've moved forward big things, pool, Main Street, the working, you know, gone from a community dialogue around equity to grant funded and staffed project work. And then just all the other things that go unnoticed in the city that are, you know, smaller critical services of staff that you have been here for over the last couple of years. So Hal, look forward to a couple more months of collaboration as you wrap up your term in the legislature. And Mike, I know I'll see you in the music. So thank you both for a couple of years of dedicated service. And so looking towards the future of filling your 2 seats, we have a slate of candidates that will be voted on town meeting day. At our first council meeting after town meeting day, we will have an orientation to get those new councilors off to a good start. And, you know, I'm looking forward to that as an opportunity to realign as a council and staff on our roles in policy and operations, refocus on our shared priority work plan, and just want to say publicly that orientation is also a good way for residents to understand the role of city council and local government better. We're also going to have to reassign commission liaisons after our new councilors are appointed. And so given that transition, as well as there's like there are a lot of things happening right now in the city, a lot of there's staff transitions, hiring processes. I want to make a strong recommendation to commissions to go on, take a break in March, maybe pause on meeting. I would ask staff liaisons if you could communicate that to commission chairs, just to give everyone a little bit of time back as we focus on bringing new folks on and trying to fill some coverage gaps with staff. And related, tomorrow, our city manager search committee will convene to review candidates. Excited to see that moving forward. You know, we engaged a recruiter a couple of months back who has been, oh my God, recruiting candidates. And The search committee will look at those tomorrow and then schedule interviews for next week, those first round interviews, in order to make a recommendation of finalists to send to the city council. Final interviews with council and an opportunity for community input will happen. March 11th will be the community side of things, and March 12th will be our council final interviews. And I do want to share that it is a really strong and diverse candidate pool. It is small again. The pool of people involved in city administration is not large nationally, but it is a really strong pool, and we have candidates from very local to across the nation. So that is exciting news. And I think that's it for me for council updates. I will pass it to Wendy for city updates.
Wendy, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Of course.
Mayor, you know, I forgot to thank the council and yourself, past and present councilors. I can't forget you guys, and I did. And when Hal started speaking, I want to let you guys finish your reports. Thank you guys all for the experience. It's been a good ride. Thank you very much. And thanks for always taking a call and always collaborating.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Take it away, Wendy.
Okay, great, thank you. Update on COVID. We, at this time, have no staff out with COVID, which is great. It's quite a change from the last 7 weeks. We've had a lot of staff out on COVID. So our experience is coinciding with the experience generally, locally. Now the CDC still does have us in a high transmission zone, so we're not proposing at this meeting any changes to the mask mandate or any other regulations that we have. But we likely will have some recommendations at the March 7th meeting. So I just want to give you a heads up that we are looking at that and staying on top of it. There is likely to be a snowstorm later this week with freezing rain expected on Thursday. I believe there's a flood watch now, so be alert for parking bans later this week. Just want to restate again, I think the mayor brought it up, that this is the last meeting before the March 1st election. So for residents out there, get out and vote. You can pick up an absentee ballot at the clerk's office, either in person or you can call them. And as of earlier today, we have registered 14 new all-resident voter individuals. And another reminder about the Winooski's 100th birthday, and there are events going on the week of March 7th also. So please come out and meet your neighbors there. So that is what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. So let's move to our regular items. And first up, we have on for discussion or approval, the Winooski COVID Recovery Business Grant Program.
Good evening, everyone. Well, Paul brings over Meredith Bay Tayak from downtown Winooski. Just a reminder that tonight we're looking at a proposed Winooski COVID Recovery Business Grant Program, which is the result of City Council's approval of up to $100,000 in emergency assistance to businesses from the overall Winooski Municipal ARPA allocation of $2.19 million. I've included the very draft, business grant program guidelines in your packet, as well as a memo that kind of walks you through step by step some of the decisions that were made. I know in our last meeting, there were a lot of questions about exactly how that would be built out. Meredith has done outreach to businesses to find out what the highest needs are, and they are in fact what we had suspected would be the highest level of need. So they really just confirmed what we had brought to you previously. For the public, this grant program is intended to maintain the stability of Winooski's existing businesses and specifically targeting 3 possible uses: providing assistance for making business commercial lease payments, providing assistance for competitive pay and or bonuses to employees who are working in frontline kind of customer service work that puts them at higher risk for exposure to COVID. And number 3, technical assistance support to modernize businesses' online presence. There's online sales, social media marketing, et cetera, just to level the playing field for people who may not have that expertise in-house. The eligibility criteria and scoring rubric that I've included in your packet loosely follows the Winooski Small Business Program structure, and that's an existing city program that has been approved by a previous city council, so has been kind of vetted a little bit itself. I am happy to walk you directly through the program. What I will say for the public is that these are grants of up to $10,000 per business, with a full allocated amount of $100,000. So if each business were to request $10,000, we could fund 10. For that reason, we've made this into a competitive grant process. So we will be scoring applicants against each other, and the highest scoring applicants will be the ones who will receive the awards. So happy to walk you through any piece of this if there are questions, or happy to just take questions.
I think we dug into this a lot at our previous meeting, and so now would be a chance for council to ask questions. If there's something you feel like is missing from here or doesn't align with our previous, we made some asks previously. And Mike, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, quick, has many businesses have been asking, or has the buzz been around in the business world of Winooski about this yet? And if so, I mean, how many, do we have a number?
I don't know how many people will apply, but I will defer to Meredith, who has done much of the outreach on what she's hearing in the community from businesses.
Yeah, I have heard a lot of great support for this, even for businesses that aren't considering applying, either because they feel they're in a safer spot, they would like to, reserve those funds for other businesses, or I've even gotten some calls from neighboring cities asking if this is for Winooski only, and that is always a good thing when we feel that we're really showing how Winooski supports our community in this way. I will say it's quite a diversity of feedback that we got. People that have been in business for decades and decades versus people that have been in business for maybe 3 to 5 years are equally interested. I cannot make a guess as to how many people will apply once the application goes out. It could be more or less than who I've spoken to already. But I do think that there is quite a bit of gratefulness coming out already about this and about how Winooski is really stepping forward in a way that a lot of communities aren't at this time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, Heather and Meredith, for putting this together. And I really appreciated the points that you added in for scoring some of these, kind of trying to find criteria that would be broadly applicable and useful on the kind of revenue loss percentages. And I'm curious on the businesses can demonstrate a positive balance sheet pre-COVID. How many, do you think that there are businesses out there that have started since the pandemic that would be disadvantaged by this? Is that a concern that the group had when you talked about this with downtown Winooski? Just curious if there's any more kind of thought on that, or not thought, but just perspective on that.
Yeah, actually, that's something that Meredith and I discussed prior to writing up the guidelines. One of the things that we were talking about is the fact that businesses that have started since the pandemic took on the risk of the pandemic in so doing. So it does disadvantage them to some degree to not be able to get points on this, but that we did that instead of making them eligible. So we make all businesses eligible with an understanding that you will score fewer points because you did start a business during a pandemic and took on that risk to some extent yourself.
But just to reiterate what Heather's saying, that those businesses are not ineligible. It would just mean that they would be essentially missing points.
Right. No, that helps. And that makes sense to me. And then you did ask if there's further direction from council on the question of code violations and whether this would be an eligible use of the funds, and the current list of eligible activities would potentially preclude dealing with code violations. I personally think it's fine to kind of proceed with this as it is, although I still wouldn't have a problem with business using these funds to address code violations if it meant that they could maintain the overall economic viability of their business, if that's one barrier for them.
Brain, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. As always, this is an excellent package. You both move very quickly. It's impressive. So thank you, first and foremost, for that. I guess I want to speak to the memo and scoring first, but I do have questions about the second document that has some more detail. So as Jim was just touching on pros and cons for excluding a business with code violations, reiterating the three, right now, the three eligible uses don't include ability to address code violations. I would be in support of having that be included as an additional element. I think it's a health and safety component. And if it's something that especially impacts the health and safety of employees, then I would want to make sure that that is addressed. And because many of our businesses are in shared buildings, so that ensures the interests of others in those shared buildings as well. So I'd be in favor of adding that in as an eligible rather than precluding it. I did have a question. I don't know if it was captured in the second framework document. In cases where there are scoring ties, what's the method for addressing that?
We don't have a method written, so thank you for bringing that up, because that's true. We will have to come up with something going forward. I've never experienced that in looking at any of our grants, but we absolutely could experience it, that. So thank you. That's a very good point.
And just glancing through the second document, again, I think some of these are just clarification. So the three eligible items, adding in code violations, and then can you just walk me through the thought process behind some of the ineligible activities, in particular, like rehabilitation of a building. So to me, that almost goes into code violation, code needs. The acquisition of equipment or machinery, refinancing, that feels like that has to do with financial stability and sovereignty for a business, and that should be within reason. But again, you may have some thoughts that I'm not aware of. And then the last one is the catch-all other activities as identified. It feels like it's maybe too much of a catch-all, but again, there may be some other things.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate those questions. I think based on the conversation that we had on the January 24th meeting, there were some concerns that people would take these funds and use them for leasehold improvements that weren't absolutely necessary. So if we are considering allowing people to use them to improve, like to bring up code violations and improve the conditions there, then I think that would have to be taken out of ineligible activities. But what was specifically discussed is we didn't want to see things like, facade upgrades and things like that with these funds when there were, really deep needs in the community. So I think that could be tweaked if we do decide to go forward with allowing people to make improvements to code violations. The catch-all activity is, the catch-all is really only because there's always something really strange that pops up in an application that is very clear to everyone on the team should not qualify, and that allows for that team to say, oh, no way. So that's all that's for. Maybe it won't happen. I hope it won't happen, but it's always good to have something written in to allow when something doesn't pass the sniff test for everyone to say that doesn't pass the sniff test.
Okay. And the last one about the thoughts around the refinancing or relating to just the financial sovereignty component?
Yeah, I took a bunch of what were eligible activities under our Winooski Small Business Loan Program and specifically called them out as not eligible here because these are grant funds. So there's still access to the Winooski Small Business Loan Program to do that sort of thing. So we're not saying that businesses can't do that, just not with grant funds from the city.
Got it. No, I appreciate that. Again, I know there's always a rhyme and reason to things, so I appreciate that being clarified. Yeah, I guess for the rehabilitation, to me, as long as it's health and safety and code relates to an existing code violation or like, I would allow a sniff test for preventative code violations as well. Or I would be comfortable with that. I won't, let the other counselors speak to their comfort, but I'd say especially for health and safety components. Apologize for continuing to ask more questions. So subject page 4, item section 4B, subject to reporting requirements. Is that, because it sounded like with the ARPA funds, because we're under 10 million, that we don't have, the city doesn't have reporting requirements. So this seems to be something different from that. So just making sure.
Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, we do still have reporting requirements for ARPA as a non-entitlement unit. Revenue loss is a category that we can claim being under 10 million, but you still have to report the use of funds.
Okay.
I have received information from VLCT and an auditor, some guidance that may give us some flexibility in terms of loosening some of the restrictions on ARPA dollars that I can bring to the council as an update at your, I believe the second meeting in March is what we're targeting for ARPA update.
Okay. Then next section 5, B. Are these going to be hard copy, electronic applications? And then moving on to section 6B1, the committees will review shall meet as needed. So just thinking about wanting to be timely, and the deadline is March 25th, and it feels like it should be reviewed in bulk, but I don't want to, I don't know what your process is, but just kind of thinking about some of the details. So that's all. Those are my questions.
So in answer to your first question, it should be hard copy and electronic. And I also think it should be translated, but I don't know how quickly we can do that. So if it isn't translated, then what we should do is we should have workshops where specific workshops where people who speak different languages will have interpreters there to assist them filling them out to make it equitable. In terms of the meeting as needed to review, my hope and what we do with the Winooski Small Business Loan Committee is we meet before the next city council meeting to review an application so that it's a quick turnaround, and then it's reviewed by the pending city council approval to go ahead and put it on the agenda. We put it on the next city council agenda. I would expect this would be the same thing because time is of the essence here. So that's the expectation, but I left a little bit of leeway here in case, one, we don't decide to go with the downtown committee board as recommended, and we need to get a board together. We need to be able to accommodate their volunteer needs. So that's why it's a little bit looser, but the expectation fully is that it would be immediate and then to the next city council meeting.
That, and we won't have you with your talent to move things along.
I think it'll move along pretty quickly though, because I think Meredith is pretty motivated to get these out there, but thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for answering my questions.
Hal or Mike, do either of you have questions?
I do.
Heather and Meredith, I think you did a good job of making a clear document that addresses what was a pretty in-depth discussion when this came up before. The only thing that I saw that I think is missing is I thought we had previously discussed a qualification to apply for this. You've already applied for or were ineligible to apply for state programs.
Yeah, and I apologize for that. I had heard that both ways. And as I was thinking about it, writing the draft document, it occurred to me that that might put some of our new American business owners that don't have the resources and don't have assistance to apply for some of those things at a significant disadvantage. So one of the things that I was thinking I might propose here would be that we request that people do apply for those before they accept grant funds from us. So then they would be leveraging those funds, but we wouldn't be setting something up that systemically might discriminate against some people who have less access and less ease of applying for those programs. But that's just an idea. I open that up to you.
I like that approach. And then we're also then helping make sure people know that that exists.
Correct.
If others have other thoughts on that approach, obviously share. I did want to come back to the question about code violations, building upgrades, whatever. I would be fine with the health and safety aspect. Like, you can do a thing that addresses a health and safety concern. I would be opposed to renovations that are not directly connected to that. Thinking of the spirit of the funds being like recovery from COVID impacts, making some sort of significant upgrade does not feel aligned. So I feel like that's similar to what Jim and Bryn said, that maybe we have some alignment here around that.
That's what I'm hearing. Thank you.
I think it's agreed. I'm sorry, I spoke out of turn. I should raise.
Absolutely, go ahead, Mike.
I think we're on a good page here, because since a lot of technology has changed in the last 2 years, mainly for restaurants with the to-go apps and some computer software. Also, we've learned how HVAC systems that move air better is for a safer environment for people to gather. So I'm for, if they need money to get their systems upgraded and to be a safer for the masses, and I think we should definitely use that money for that. I mean, that's what I think. I think that's what they're going to be needing the money for payroll and for upgrades such as that anyway, and pay the rent.
I did want to open it to public comment. I see there is a question in the chat, but others can use the raise hand feature in Zoom or raise your hand in City Council. The question posed in the chat was if there are points awarded for LGBTQ plus businesses. It looks like it calls out minority and women owned. Would that be encompassed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's a great question. I am not familiar. Is there a certification program for LGBTQ plus? If there is, then yes. If there isn't, then no. So these are certified as minority businesses or women-owned businesses. And I'm not familiar with that, but there should be that certification. I'm just not aware of it if there is.
Are there any other public comments or questions? Heather or Meredith, is there any additional guidance or direction that you need?
I feel like we got what we need, but I want to ask Meredith specifically because I think Meredith and Wendy will be ushering this forward. So I want to make sure they feel comfortable about where they are.
Yeah, I feel excellent about the documentation that's been provided for this meeting. And then with these additional comments, kind of going back, tweaking a little bit, and then just, yeah, hitting the ground running. Thank you.
Bryn?
Following up on Aurora's question, there is a national LGBT Chamber of Commerce that may have a third-party certification. So it might be worth looking into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I feel like when we talked about this last time, the council was basically like, yes, do this, but we have these concerns. And those concerns have been addressed here tonight. And so you have some, I think, small tweaks. The most significant being adding an allowable use for addressing health and safety related code violations. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the Winooski COVID Recovery Business Grant Program with those modifications?
So moved.
Motion by Bryn, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 You said aye, Jim, right? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for your time. Good night.
Night.
Bye, Meredith.
Yeah.
All right. So we are on to item B. This is up for discussion. It is the draft amendments to the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations. Eric, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much. This item is on your agenda tonight for discussion and also possibly setting a public hearing to take public comments formally on the proposed amendments to parts 1 through 4 and part 9 of the form-based code incorporated into the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations. As you may recall, at your last meeting on February 7th, we had a pretty detailed discussion about the amendments, including comments from counselors that were provided in advance. This latest draft incorporates comments that were discussed at that meeting. So hopefully addressing those concerns. Specifically in the draft, there's some text that was highlighted in green, and hopefully you're looking at it on a computer because in the printed version, it is really difficult to see. But specifically on page 5 of the actual document, page 12 of the PDF version, there is clarification on the traffic impact study and soliciting comments on that from third party. The language was changed to the city may require comments, basically then putting the onus on those comments back on the applicant so that we wouldn't be, the city would not be responsible for fees associated with that. The next comment is on page 16 of the document. Document page 16, PDF page 23, where there's clarification on the how to address curb cut that is going to be closed, so that it is no longer as determined appropriate by the Director of Public Works, but that it's being done in accordance with applicable public works standards. So there's no ambiguity in what that looks like. And then finally, on document page 30, which is going to be on PDF page, once I get there, 37, this is where the most, probably the most significant changes were added, clarifying that in the areas that are allowed to be set back from the required building line, we're looking at managing stormwater runoff and mitigating any erosion of soils, making sure that any of the bicycle parking or other facilities are publicly accessible, and then adding in a completely new item C, to ensure that the landscaping, plantings, or other amenities are not blocking those areas or impeding any access between the street space and the front of the building. So those are the 3 primary changes that were made to the document based on the comments from council at the last meeting. Happy to talk about any of those specific changes or other comments included. Or if council is prepared to entertain setting a public hearing, the earliest date we could do that would be on March 21st. But I'll pause there for any comments or questions.
Thank you, Eric. I'll do a little recap for anyone who's new to this discussion. The Planning Commission has been working through this section of our zoning for a couple years. And I would say the most substantial changes here are increasing the allowable setback in the gateways, incorporating accessory dwelling units by right in all districts, as was dictated by state law, and then a lot of clarification. So not really substantive change in approach, but more making things clearer what was intended. Is that a fair summary, Eric?
I would say yes, with the exception of the ADU requirement. We covered that in a previous amendment.
Oh, we already got through that. Okay.
Yes, that's already been incorporated. So yes, there's a lot of clarification and updates that will allow for hopefully easier interpretation of the regulations and removing some of the ambiguity in how the regulations are reviewed.
And this is only a portion of our regulations. There are other sections that are still being reviewed.
That is correct. Yes, this only addresses parts 1 through 4 of 9 parts, and so basically parts 5, 6, 7, and 8 are not included at this time for review. But the Planning Commission is working on those sections and other components of the whole Unified Land Use and Development regulations.
Are there any questions from members of the public? I'm going to guess that councilors who raised concerns last time feel like your changes have addressed them. And also, again, this has been very much vetted by Planning Commission, who spent a lot of time with this section. So if somebody wanted to make a motion to set a public hearing for March 21st, that could be done. If nobody makes a motion, we would just have to bring this back for another discussion.
I'm comfortable moving this forward to public comment on the proposed date, the soonest proposed date.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we'll move on to item C, which Eric will also introduce. This is a public records request policy.
Yes, thank you very much. This item is on your agenda tonight for discussion and possible approval of both the public records request policy, and if that is approved, request to identify the city manager as the public records agent, who would be responsible for basically the intake of public records requests and disseminating that out to the appropriate staff as necessary. So a little background on this is the city does not currently have a formal public records request policy in place. There is state statute that dictates how municipalities are able to, or the guidelines for municipalities to address requests for public records. So back in 2019, I started developing a policy for this. Due to COVID, we put a pause on that, but in the last, I would say 6 to 8 months, we've seen an uptick in formal requests for public records. So we decided to bring this back again and continue working on the actual policy. So this policy, the draft policy, is very closely modeled after the guidance from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns for public records requests policies, and incorporates the various sections of statutes that deal with public records. One of the differences, or a few differences, with this policy from the model that VLCT has, is that we have other departments have either policies or orders related to public records. Specifically, the police department, because the nature of some of their records are sensitive and not able to be disseminated, they have their own policy on public records. So this would incorporate that, and if there was any inconsistencies between those two, we would defer to the Vermont Public Records Act to rectify those. Additionally, we wanted to clarify that records that are kept in the city's vault are basically always made public. Anybody can access the vault at any time and review those records whenever there's time available on the schedule from the city clerk's office, so that we're not treating those as public records in the sense that they need to be requested, because they are always available for inspection at any time. There's no need to specifically request those documents. Otherwise, this policy outlines basically the process for how records would be requested, and the process for dealing with those records, whether they be specifically, whether it be a request for an inspection of records or transmission of records. Additionally, we talk about in the policy the nature of the records, and if they're not able to be transmitted, we won't create new records if they don't exist, and things of that nature. Again, all kind of aligned and following the model public records policy provided by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Additionally, we outline fees that are available. We don't currently have a specific section in our fee ordinance for public records. We do have some fees for copying of records. For example, the clerk's office has a specific fee for copying. The police department has a fee for copying of their records. But in this case, we would most likely defer to the Secretary of State's guidance. They have a uniform schedule of fees in the interim until we develop or consider developing our own fees for public records. So there are several forms that have been created that would go along with the policy. Those aren't included with this tonight. They're more just the forms that would be submitted by someone making the request, and the follow-up forms from staff or whoever would be completing that request. So those are more just more administrative documents, but tonight is the copy of the policy for consideration.
Thanks, Eric. Bryn, go ahead.
The first thing that comes to mind to me is an equity lens. One, financial barriers, and then two, language barriers. I don't know. I know we need something in place, and I don't want to delay having something. But I do see that this document, is not accounting for those elements. And that's something that we as a council should take into consideration in the near future.
Bryn, I want to respond to that. It's like a super fair point. Heather mentions some of the work, the equity audit earlier, and there's like potentially a grant to do some planning for housing. And we have this Working Communities Challenge grant and an equity director. I think this is something that comes later as that grant and those other efforts work forward towards creating strategies. Like, we need a language access plan that says what the threshold is of what requires translation, because we're making all those decisions randomly, sort of right now, and reactively. And so I just want to make that statement publicly, like, we have a bunch of gaps that we are working to address, but we're not going to be able to take them on, every single time. And that we do we do make an effort to do the sort of that strategic planning before implementing a bunch of individual solutions. And so I think it is good that you raised that. Like, that's a thing that we should be asking ourselves so that we can think about in the long term strategically, what are the things that need to have translation available, or where do we need to have financial sort of, what's the word? Like scholarship, essentially.
And that's one of the reasons why the scholarship policy was written as broadly as it was, so that in the event there were fees that we wanted to have financial assistance available for, we could always have that be part of the application form where somebody could request a waiver of fees.
That's right, Angela. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, and again, what I started with is saying not to preclude us from moving forward with this, but to identify it that it just raises a glaring need that should be absorbed into that conversation.
Are there other council questions? Jim?
I want to thank you, Eric, for resurrecting this. I remember having this conversation back in 2019, and it's good to see it resurfacing here. And I believe we talked about this, and I couldn't find my notes, so I apologize if you already covered this in kind of reviving and reconsidering this policy. But where we have records that are already electronic, it marks that the discretion of how those are delivered is up to the custodian, and that they could choose print or electronic to distribute an electronic record. Have you seen anything in the model policy or other policies that default to electronic, except, I guess I'm wondering if we could change that so that it is a default electronic delivery available to the requester, rather than at the discretion, like by the choice of the custodian. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do remember that conversation, and I believe I tried to incorporate that in. I can't necessarily point to the specific section. I think really where that comes into play, though, Counselor, is whether or not the requestor is asking for inspection of the records or transmission of the records. So if they merely just want to see the records, then it's possible that a hard copy would need to be created in order for that person to inspect the record. If they were looking for the record to be received specifically, there are some instances that we may not have the ability to, for example, we have some programs, and I don't have the specific answer to this, but there's one of the programs we have for tracking and reporting on building code issues. It might not have the ability to specifically export the reports out into an electronic format. So the only option may be to print it and then scan it back to an electronic format. So it's really depending on how the records are stored, I think is really why we wanted to include that to give some flexibility. I think I would assume that to the extent practical, the custodian would transmit electronically if that's the preferred option for the requester. There may just need to be some accountability of the time or the nature of creating, if it's not already an electronic file, to make sure that if we are transmitting, we're able to recoup fees for the time and effort to do that.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I wasn't thinking about kind of the proprietary software formats or ones that don't easily translate to something that someone could open on a standard computer. And I think that presumption that you have is where I would hope we would default, right? If it is like a CSV or a PDF or a Word document, that those are sent electronically as is. And I think making that expectation in the policy that where practicable, the electronic version is provided, unless the requester requests otherwise, and then you recover fees if it does require a lot of work to print it in paper. But I agree, we don't want to be asking staff to print things so that they can scan them and send a PDF to the requester if possible. I'm just interested in allowing text searching of documents, especially for longer documents, so that people can access information within long documents and not throwing up any barriers to accessing government information. And maybe that the way it's written is clear enough if there's a way to privilege the transmission of electronic versions when those formats are commonly used by the general public. I think that would be worth considering. If it's too complicated, obviously that's not worth their time, but it's just something that I was considering.
Yeah, the other thing that we may run into with that is if information needs to be redacted from an electronic document, it's possible that, you know, depending on the format, again, it may need to be printed in order to properly make the redactions and then have to scan it back in to transmit it electronically. So yeah, there could be multiple scenarios where an electronic version is not easily just transmitted and needs attention.
Thank you.
Are there other questions about this policy? Are there any questions from members of the public? Hal, I just saw you here.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. You know, to Councilor Oakley's point about, you know, the equity questions, you know, this is something I would just put out there for future consideration, but perhaps Yasmin's work could include the development of what I call probing equity questions that could be something that we would adopt, and all of the teams, all of the leaders would be able to utilize it. We did the same thing in the legislature just recently in our social equity caucus, and we're now rolling it out so that we as legislators have this lens that we would refer to, so that as we're developing policy, it's done through the lens of equity. So
can you share that example?
I will. I will share it. Took a lot of work, but you can borrow and do what you want with it.
Thank you for that, Hal.
Sure.
I like that. I like the sound of that approach. And sorry for cutting you off. I got excited.
It's okay.
Is there any other specific feedback that would be helpful, Eric?
I don't believe so, no.
It sounds like this is relatively standard. We haven't done a bunch of customization off of recommended language, and we are referring to existing policies, both of our own and at the state level. It's on for discussion or approval. Somebody could make a motion to approve it as is, or we could revisit it at another meeting. Okay, sounds like we want to take a look at this again in the future. All right, with that, we can move on to item D, also on for discussion approval. Sorry,
Mayor, if I may, just for clarification, what council is looking for is better language related to the transmission of records in electronic format when possible or practical, to ensure those documents are in some form of a searchable format primarily. And then is council interested in us trying to address any type of equity or language barriers in this policy currently for the next iteration, or just looking at the comments from Councilor Duncan?
Bryn?
I would simply make a reference, recommend making a reference or an inclusion to the scholarship if there's financial barriers, and noting if there's a language barrier to raise that request, but not putting any obligation into it. But since we have a scholarship policy, I would say referencing that at least. If we want to leave out the language support, translation support, then for the time being, I'm fine with that for this soonest update.
I'd be okay with that too. I don't see anyone like disagreeing. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Now we'll move on to item D, also on for discussion or approval. This is establishment of Cannabis Control Commission.
Yes, thank you very much. I will address this one as well. So this item is on tonight for discussion approval to establish a Cannabis Control Commission, basically made up of City Council, similar to the Liquor Control Board. With the passage of Act 164 in 2020, the state allowed for municipalities to opt in to allow for retail sales of cannabis in the municipalities. The city of Winooski put that on the town meeting day ballot in 2021, and it did pass. With that, the city has the option, not a requirement, to establish a local cannabis control commission that would issue local licenses for retail establishments, again, similar to the way the Liquor Control Board operates. There is no requirement from the state or through Act 164 that the city does need to establish a local commission, but it does provide additional oversight to ensure that the licensees are meeting any local requirements, and gives the city the ability to then revoke licenses for failure to meet certain standards. In the absence of a local cannabis control commission, all licensing would be done at the state level, and the municipality would have no real oversight over any type of licensure for those retail establishments. So this is really a mechanism to provide local control, again, consistent with the way the Liquor Control Board operates. So before you is a draft resolution that has been reviewed and commented on by legal counsel, and comments incorporated in for your consideration.
Thank you, Eric. Are there questions from council about this recommendation or resolution? I will say I'm a big fan of aligning this as much as possible to how we manage the liquor licenses. Mike, I see your hand.
I do. Now, would the state cannabis commission supersede municipals, or would we work hand in hand? I mean, would it be like the DLC supervising these retails and reporting violations to the Cannabis Commission Board that we're trying to establish?
So, sure. So as I understand it, all oversight and truly the regulation of the statute would be done by the state. The local Cannabis Control Commission would have oversight over any local policy that may be in place. So if, for example, we put in any additional regulations on signage or setbacks or land use components to siting of retail establishments, we would be able to enforce those through a local Cannabis Control Commission. Outside of that, most of the regulatory capacity will be done through the state's Cannabis Control Board. Additionally, the state will not issue a license for a local retailer. So if a city or if a municipality establishes a local Cannabis Control Commission, the state will not issue a license unless the municipality has issued a license as well. So there wouldn't be any preemption by the state without the municipality authorizing the licensing.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Are there any questions, comments from members of the public? All right, I'm not hearing any concerns. Does someone want to move to approve this resolution to establish the Cannabis Control Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Eric. We are on to item E now. Angela will be introducing the approval of fund budgets.
All right, so the first budget-related item is the recommendation to approve the fund budgets for the water, wastewater, parking, community services, TIF, and rental registry programs that were presented to council between December and January. So this is all of the fund budgets in the city except community development, and that is because of the specific circumstances around the trust payment. We are recommended by lawyers to have the TIF budget approved first, have you meet as the trustees to authorize repayment of those funds back to the city, and then you can authorize the community development budget. These are pretty straightforward. I know that we've had a lot of discussion leading up to this, but happy to discuss any further questions that you might have.
This is a sort of administrative task we complete every year ahead of putting that budget forward to voters.
So these ones are not presented to voters. Voters vote on the general fund. So these are purely approved by the city council.
Questions? All right, does someone want to make a motion to approve these fund budgets that we looked at for months?
Hello.
Motion by Jim, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, so it is 7:28. I am going to call a recess of the city council meeting to reconvene at 7:35. So at 7:28 p.m. This meeting of the Winooski Community Development Trust Board of Trustees. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Hal Colston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so we have just one item on this agenda, and this is to approve the FY23 Winooski Community Development Trust Fund allocation to the general fund. Angela, would you like to elaborate any further from your last?
Sure. So $150,000 was included in the FY23 budget for payment on the Winooski Community Development Trust promissory note. The council has been appointed as trustees of these funds as part of the dissolution of the Winooski Community Development Corporation, and as trustees can allocate those funds back to the city. They do have specific requirements stating that those funds can only be used for community development. So historically, we have contributed those funds to the Community Development Fund specifically.
All right, questions from council or public comment? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the WCDC allocation of $150,000 to the general fund?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And carries. So that is the end of the Winooski Community Development Trust meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carried. We are going to resume city council at 7:35, so we can all take a brief break right now. Okay, I've got 7:35. We will resume our city council meeting. We are on section 13, regular items. A, this is the community development fund, the community development budget on for approval.
Right, this is the last of the fund budgets that's remaining for approval. This budget is created from that contribution that the trust just donated back to the city for FY23. It funds Heather's position and a lot of the community development work that is being done around business outreach and some of our communication coordinators' position.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right, do I have a motion to approve the community development budget?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item B is our water rate resolution.
All right, so per the fees chapter of our ordinance, water and wastewater rates are set by annual resolution during the budget process. John Rauscher proposed budgets that included a rate increase of 4.5%. We are going from 4209 per thousand cubic feet with a minimum of 500 cubic feet to 4398 per thousand cubic feet. With a minimum of 500 cubic feet. So this combined with the sewer charge change is approximately, I believe we said about $13 to $20 impact annually to households.
All right. Any questions about the water rate resolution? Any public comment? Again, you can use raise hand. All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve the water rate resolution?
Moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item C, on for approval, the wastewater resolution.
Similar to the water rate, this is set in the fees chapter is being approved by resolution during the budget process. John Rauscher's developed budget includes another 4.5% increase on the wastewater rate, going from 54.88 per thousand cubic feet to 57.35 per thousand cubic feet. Combined with the water rate, $13 to $20 impact for a household.
All right, any questions about the wastewater rate? Any public comment? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the wastewater resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
This brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Mike and Hal, I hope your Monday evenings are wonderful.
We'll be thinking of you.
You'll be missed.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Aye.
Drop in anytime.
All right. Thank you.